Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk was the full OB13 showcase, and it was a big one. It covered new as aspect, balance changes, the new Q screen, the new quick play mode with some experimental changes, as well as Mercury, which I already have a video for out on the channel that I'll link down below, as I won't be covering him again in this video. This was a huge showcase, so without further ado, let's jump into the recap. First up, a small hotfix went out today which nerfed Ganesha aspect. The protections are gone entirely, the base damage and scaling have come down quite a bit, and they also took off 5% from the movement speed buff. Good changes for sure, and might even be enough, to be honest. This was the main problem with Ganesha aspect, and this is a pretty heavy nerf, but we'll see where he lands after this and if he might need more. But moving into the OB13 show proper, first up we have new as aspect, which is aiming to shift her into an ADC/carry playstyle. The first change from regular Nuwa is that her fog will now travel forward a bit and then stop instead of traveling the full duration. Also, while in the fog, Nuwa won't be revealed from stealth by basic attacking. A downside here is that Shining Metal's int scaling is reduced pretty substantially on both the base projectile and the explosion. But the biggest change by far in the aspect is to her ultimate. It still works basically the same, but now deals damage based on your basic attack power instead of her intelligence, which is sort of equivalent to having strength scaling. It can also now crit and will proc basic attack item effects on hit. When she lands and gains the strength of fire buff like normal, it will also provide attack speed. This aspect seems really fun, honestly. Am I terrified of a Nuwa ult that can crit? Sure, but this seems like a cool design, and Nuwa already had quite a few elements in her base kit that incentivize auto attacking, so even though this aspect doesn't fully change any abilities or anything like that, it should still work really well in my opinion. The hit markers that we saw in one of the OB12 flash tests are going to be fully ready for this update as well. There's a new reticle and it will flash red and do a small animation when you hit something, with an extra flashy animation when you get a kill that looks really good in my opinion. They did also say there will be a sound effect associated with the hit markers, but it wasn't ready for the show. You can also change the color and thickness of your reticle in the settings for those that want to do that. Next up, the new Q screen is also going to be coming in this update, which looks like an absolutely massive improvement over what we had before that was very alpha and hard to navigate. It now has a base screen with large buttons for quick play, unranked, competitive, and versus AI as main selections, with training and custom in smaller buttons on the side. Clicking on one of the main selections takes you into a sub-menu with various options for different game modes. Duel is being moved to the competitive section now as well, alongside ranked conquest, since the game mode already has picks and bans, and it will probably be followed up in future patches by duel leaderboards and stuff like that. It is very much a competitive game mode at its heart, so I think this makes sense. This whole screen looks really sick in my opinion, and while it's not a gameplay feature or anything, it's the sort of stuff that Smite 2 really needs to bring up the polish level for me, and it will help a lot for new players who might be confused about how to even queue up in the first place. You might have been a little confused about what the quick play section even is when unranked also exists, and that's because quick play is a new thing in this update. It's intended to showcase more experimental features that may or may not come to the core modes of Smite depending on how well they are received, and this will be the default queue for new players. If you've seen previous talks where Kilgoon mentioned some big swings and experimental changes, quick play is where a lot of that stuff will go down. They showcased the current quick play mode on the show, which is arena but with a simplified build system. You select a build style at the start and then get offered 3 options each time you have enough gold to buy a new item, and you can select one of the options. Future options will be influenced by what you've already chosen, and there are no components or tier 2 items here, you just buy tier 3s. The idea here is that the system will be better for new players compared to auto build, as it lets them see what the items actually do and make a choice, rather than just being auto fed items and not even knowing what they do, which I think makes a lot of sense. Throwing new players in at the deep end and making them create a full build is definitely too overwhelming, but auto building for them doesn't actually help them understand what items do. This system should be a good middle ground where new players get to experience the item system in a limited way and what it has to offer, but should make it easier for them to graduate to creating their own builds rather than just auto building forever, since they will now have seen what the tier 3 items do via quick play. If they just use auto build, most will never even know what the items they are building even do. Of course, this has no direct benefit to me and probably not to you either, of those watching this, but things that improve the new player experience and help them learn will yield indirect benefits for all players in the long run, so I think this is a really cool system. Kilgoon also said that it's very unlikely they would ever bring this style of building into normal queues, but it's good for new players, and they could maybe even have a hybrid system that takes some elements from this as a building option in regular queues to help inexperienced players graduate to full item building. That's not the only change in this quick play compared to normal Smite 2 though. There's also an in-combat dodge in this mode on a short cooldown, similar to what you might have in a single single-player action RPG. They also mentioned that the melee gods have a slightly longer version of this than the ranged gods do, and they could experiment in future with gods having slight variations on this combat dodge, and I would imagine this is one of the more experimental changes that is more likely to potentially come into normal queues at some point compared to the pick 3 build system. Another quick play change here is that auto attacks travel slightly faster, equivalent to Griffin Wing earrings in Smite 1. This is certainly interesting, but I could potentially see some issues with putting this on quick play, as new players might get used to it and then the game will feel strange in normal modes and they might start missing all of their autos and just go back to quick play, which could be bad. Eventually you want new players to graduate out of quick play and play the regular game. Next up for the experiments though is a really weird one, which is a tweak to the action camera that makes it even more action-y and lets you aim basic attacks up and down depending on where you're looking. And yes, this does mean you can miss basic attacks by aiming them into the ground or up into the sky. This doesn't affect abilities at all, just basic attacks. They did say you still can't hit leaping, banished, or otherwise airborne enemies as well. This will apply to the action camera in all modes, not just quick play. This just seems really weird and totally suboptimal for new players, I think. I really hope they have some solid data that this will improve the new player retention, because this really feels antithetic to what Smite is and seems like it will teach new players bad habits and give a false impression of what the game actually is. Changing your camera angle is one thing because ultimately it doesn't affect the core gameplay, but letting you aim basic attacks into the ground and miss just seems like a step too far for me personally. I've generally been on board with most of these new player additions that they've been doing, and even with the action camera I think it could be useful even though I personally don't like it, but this just seems really strange and could give the wrong impression of what Smite actually is as a game when new players try it out. I'll be happy to be proven wrong though. If we actually see an increase in new player retention from this, then that's great. Ultimately, I'm just a gamer and probably don't have the full context and data that they have at the studio, so we'll see how it pans out overall. Moving on from quick play stuff though, Kilgoon also mentioned that the UE 5.5 upgrade is in for this patch, which won't be too noticeable for most players, but should come with some performance improvements, especially in the realm of PSO caching, which is what causes a lot of the hitches when you first start a match. They also made a QOL change to hit sound attenuation for basic attacks, so you will now hear your own basic attack hit sounds at full volume regardless of range instead of being really quiet at max range, which should help with feedback on if you're hitting or not. They also made a change to audio balancing in general for abilities. Your own abilities will be a bit louder, enemy abilities will be the loudness your abilities used to be, and ally abilities will be the same as they were previously, which is a bit quieter than yours and enemies. They also redesigned Ymir's basic attack audio in this patch as a test to see if people like it. The intent is that it will feel more punchy and obvious that you're hitting and doing damage. If this is well received, they're going to consider doing it for every god's basic attacks. They also made a change to the highlighting, and it's now just an outline instead of the entire model, which I think looks a lot cleaner and you can more clearly see as what you're looking at compared to just like a red box before. There's also a white hit reaction color now to give feedback on when you're hitting stuff. This will work on basically every target you can hit, and they did say they're still refining this and it might be a little less bright or last a little bit less time in the full build. They also made a change to damage numbers to make them appear more uniformly. Previously they would appear in different places based on character height and model. Now it will just appear above the health bar regardless of the god or target you're hitting. They also made some small minor adjustments to number size and how they stack together. You can also now adjust the number size in settings, which is cool. The Friend Has Come Online notifications are going to be in this patch as well, which should help with social features. There's also a new button that lets you directly message on Steam more easily from your Smite 2 friends list. You can also now invite to party from end of match lobby, which is cool. The home screen showcase now has forward and backward buttons and will be larger and easier to press and navigate. They also added close or continue buttons to a bunch of different screens or pop-ups that didn't have them. An Independence Day event is going to be launching in this patch too, where you can collect fireworks around the map and earn global emotes. Moving on to skins for OB13 though, first up we have Beach Babe Aphrodite, which is coming as a Traveler Market with prisms. Just like the other ones we've seen recently, you get the base skin included with the Traveler Market, some prisms, and a couple of other things. This one has a badge and a tracker that tracks how long you've given jealousy to allies as Afro. The prisms are Aqua Splash, White Sands, and Midnight Cove. These have slightly different outfits as well as the color changes, which is pretty cool. The next skin in OB13 is also a classic Traveler with prisms, and that is Chef Special Kepri. You can get the Chef title and badge alongside 4 prisms. They are Beach Blue, Bumble Sea, Stormtide, and Razzle Shade, which has a shifting rainbow color palette, which is pretty cool. Next up for skins though, Scylla is getting a cross-gen skin in this update with Trash Goblin, and this will also have prisms. They are Pale Pest, Ruby Rummager, and Possum Punk. They also said they're almost done with the cross-gen skins now, so maybe that will allow for more time to make brand new Smite 2 skins going forward once they're done with those. They also mentioned that they've started reframing all of the gods in the match lobby so they better fit in the frame, and this is the first of their steps towards an overall improved presentation for the match lobby. The next wave of announcer packs will also be coming in this update, but they didn't show them or which ones are in. We'll have to check those out on the flash test, which should be live as this video goes out if all goes to plan. Moving on though, let's cover balance for OB13. Upon started off by saying that a general pass is being done on solo in bruiser items, as they feel like full tank and full damage solos are in a reasonable spot in terms of balance, but a lot of bruiser options for items and gods in solo aren't really doing well. First up, Berserker Shield is getting 5 more physical procs, Contagion is getting 2 more health regen and an increase to the cooldown refund per ability the enemy casts from 0.25 seconds to 0.5 seconds. Genji's Guard is getting 5 more physical protections and a decrease to its internal cooldown on the passive. Gladiator Shield is getting a 5% increase to its protection scaling on the proc and 10 flat damage added to it as well. Lifebinder is getting 100 gold cost reduction, Runeforged is getting a 150 gold cost reduction, and finally for items, Shogun's Ofuda is getting 5 more magical procs and 5% more passive attack speed. There's a small conquest change as well. The side teleporters are now disabled until 10 minutes into the match. W change for sure, though you all know that personally I'd like to see these just gone, to be honest. Moving on to god balance though, first up is Agni, who is getting a shift. The aspect proc damage is getting its multiplier per stack of combustion reduced from 30% to 20%, so that should hit less hard in general. But Agni as a whole is getting a revert to his ultimate cooldown back down to 18 seconds from 20 before. Achilles is getting another buff with 10% more damage in the outer area of his 1 and more base damage on his 3. Bellona's Scourge healing is going from 5 up to 9 based on rank to just 10 flat at all ranks, which is a pretty big deal for the early levels, and her ultimate is getting a similar base damage increase that is once again stronger in the early levels. Cerberus' ultimate is getting 10 seconds off of his cooldown. Danzaburō's 1 is getting 1 second off of his cooldown, and his ultimate is getting a pretty substantial base damage increase and a large increase to its intelligence scaling from 70% to 100%. Geb had an issue fix where his 1 dash damage was too high, and his aspect 1 specifically is getting more scaling on the leap damage. Hercules is getting a buff to the healing return from his 3, and the bonus protections from items is going up from 20% to 30%. Mulan is getting some buffs with 10 more base damage per hit on her 1 and an increase to the heal on her 2. Kukulkan now gets the movement speed buff from his 2 if he dashes, which he didn't before. And finally, Aspect Nemesis ultimate healing is now unaffected by anti-heal. They also said they're looking at Scylla Aspect for some buffs, and they probably will have something for it in this update, they just don't have it ready for the show. But that's everything coming in patch OB13, which drops Tuesday next week. An absolute ton of changes and new stuff in this patch, so let me know in the comments how you feel about all of it, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.